My name is Naomi Carter, and for most of my life, I've played the role of the quiet one in the family, the agreeable one, the smiler, the one who brings the pie and doesn't cause trouble. That role kept the peace, but it also erased who I really was. Still, I accepted it for the sake of my son. It was my niece's graduation party, and the backyard was full of laughter. Balloons tied to plastic chairs, paper plates stacked with ribs and potato salad. My father, Gerald, stood tall in his veteran's cap, giving a toast about how far the Carter name had come. As usual, his words made it sound like we were some proud dynasty. Instead of a middle-class family from Ohio, clinging to tradition more than truth, my son Ethan stood beside me, quietly shifting from foot to foot. He had just been accepted into 3 strong universities, all on merit. No tutors, no special prep, just hard work and late nights helping me take care of my mother when she was on chemo. I looked at him and felt the kind of pride that comes from knowing how much someone has endured just to get a seat at the table. So I asked the question I'd been holding in. I leaned in toward my father and asked, "Dad, does Ethan get a piece of the college fund too?" I said it casually, like I didn't care about the answer, even though I did. Gerald didn't even look up from his ribs. He muttered, "Why waste it on him? He's from a broken home." There are moments in life that don't just hurt, they mark you. That sentence split something inside me. Not because it was the worst thing I'd ever heard from him, and not because Ethan hadn't been excluded before. He had, but this time it was the way he said it. Like it was obvious, like it was reasonable. Like Ethan's life and worth had already been written off with a shrug and a mouthful of food. I glanced at Ethan. He didn't flinch. He just looked down. His plastic fork paused above his plate, then continued eating a little slower than before. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the pie in his lap, though a part of me wanted to. I just smiled that same smile I perfected for years. But inside I was burning, not just for myself, but for my son. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Ethan had been working on something. He had been chosen as valedictorian, and he was preparing a speech. And though he hadn't told me what he was planning to say, I had a feeling it would be more than just thank you and school spirit. That moment in the backyard, that was the spark, the final push, and it would lead to the speech that none of us, especially Gerald, would ever forget. To understand what Ethan said on that stage, you need to understand who he is and who he had to become just to be seen. Ethan was born during the worst year of my life. I was 24, lying in a hospital bed with one hand cradling my newborn son and the other signing my divorce papers. My ex-husband Daniel had walked out on me 2 months before Ethan was born. He cheated while I was pregnant, and once he left, he never really came back. Not emotionally, not financially. A birthday text here and there, an occasional awkward lunch when it was convenient for him. That's all Ethan ever got. When I came back to live with my parents, I thought maybe they'd soften. Instead, my mother cried more over my divorce than she did when she lost her sister. My siblings Joel and Caroline barely spoke to me. My father said only one thing, and it stuck with me for years. "Well, you made your bed, but I made another bed too. One for Ethan. I made it warm and safe and full of stories at bedtime." Because even if the world around us looked down on us, I refused to let my son feel small inside our home. We didn't have much. I worked full-time at the local library, and we stretched every paycheck. Ethan never asked for much. He wore thrift store clothes without complaint. He never questioned why his cousins got iPads and we had secondhand books. And he never said a word when Christmas came and he got socks while the others opened new video games. Still, he paid attention. He noticed everything. He was 8 years old when I realized how extraordinary he was. That year, he read through the entire youth section of our library and started writing short stories. It's not silly kid stories either, real ones full of heart and depth that made me cry. Not just because they were good, but because I knew they came from a child who felt everything but said so little. My father never asked about his grades. My siblings never praised his writing contests. At family dinners, Caroline's kids sat at the adult table. Ethan sat with toddlers even when he was 14. One year, my father forgot to hang a stocking for him altogether. Ethan didn't complain. He just folded his napkin 3 times and waited for others to speak before he did. I saw him carry that weight. I saw him write in his journal the way other kids played video games. That journal was his safe place, his voice, when no one else seemed to want to hear it. The only person in the family who truly saw him, really saw him, was my mother. Ruth. She called him her little professor. Even during her final months, when the chemo left her weak and gray, she would still smile when Ethan walked in the room. She said he reminded her of me before I learned to shrink myself. When she passed, Ethan was 15. That night, I found a folded poem in her Bible titled "The Last Woman Who Saw Me." That line tore me open, and from then on, it was just us. 2 quiet people learning to survive in a family that never made room for either of us. After my mother passed, Ethan changed. He didn't fall apart. He didn't rebel. Instead, he became quieter, more focused. There was a calm around him, but it wasn't peace. It was intensity. He started waking up earlier, staying up later. I'd find him surrounded by notebooks, highlighters, scholarship applications, practice essays. He wasn't chasing approval anymore. He was chasing something deeper, something he hadn't named yet. Maybe purpose, maybe escape. The moment with my father at the graduation party that why wasted on him moment did something to both of us. For me, it was rage. For Ethan, it was fuel. That night, I found him at his desk typing. I asked if he was okay. He said he was fine. Then, after a long pause, he looked up and asked, "Do you think it's true?" What Grandpa said. That question broke something in me, not because he asked it, but because I knew it meant he was internalizing it. That he was wondering if being from a broken home really did make him broken. I sat beside him and told him the truth. No, baby. What's broken is how they see the world, not you. He nodded quietly. But I could see it the way he filed the moment away, like all the others. The things he never said out loud but never forgot. After that, the intensity grew. He entered every essay contest, every scholarship opportunity. He pulled straight A's while working weekends at the grocery store. His teachers began to take notice. His English teacher, Mr. Ramirez, told me over email, "Your son doesn't just have talent. He has something to say." And then one night over dinner, Ethan dropped his fork and said, almost like an afterthought, "They picked me? Picked you for what?" I asked. "Valedictorian," he said. I stared at him, part stunned, part proud. Not because I didn't think he deserved it. I knew he did. But because I understood what that platform meant. It wasn't just a title. 'Twas a microphone, a room, a moment. "What are you going to say?" I asked. He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "I don't know yet, but I think I want them to hear me. Really hear me." That's when I realized this wasn't about college anymore. It was about the $50,000 college fund his cousins got, or the seat at the adult table he never had. It wasn't even about Gerald. This was about Ethan claiming his voice. And if there's one thing more powerful than someone who's always been heard, it's someone who's finally decided to speak. From that moment on, something shifted in our home. It was subtle, but I felt it. The air was different. The silences were deeper. Ethan wrote more, spoke less. I never asked to read the speech. He never offered. But I saw the way he carried that journal. I heard the way he whispered lines to himself when he thought no one was listening. I watched him build something from pain, not out of revenge, but out of truth. And somehow I knew it wasn't going to be polite. It was going to be honest. Let them hear you, I thought. Let them finally hear you. The days leading up to the graduation ceremony felt different. There was no chaos, no rushing, just a strange, settled kind of calm. Ethan moved through the house like someone with a mission. Focused still, almost like he was preserving energy for something big. I knew better than to press him. He needed space, not pep talks. One evening I asked how the speech was coming along. He gave me that signature half smile. The one he uses when he does unwant to lie, but is unquite ready to tell the truth either. "It's coming along," he said. "That's good." I nodded. Then, without thinking, I asked, "What do you want it to say?" He looked at me for a long second before answering. "I just want it to matter." That word stuck with me. Matter. Not impress, not entertain. Matter. That's what he was chasing. I'd emailed the details of the ceremony to our extended family time location, seating chart. No one responded. Not even a polite "we'll try to make it." Part of me was hurt, but the rest of me had expected it. It had always been like this. When it came to Ethan, they looked past him, through him, like he was background noise in the drama of their lives. But what they didn't realize was that background noise sometimes builds into a storm. The night before the ceremony, I found Ethan sitting alone on our porch, his journal in his lap, eyes turned toward the stars. He looked so young in that moment, like the little boy who once asked me if trees could feel sadness. So full of thought, so full of heart. I sat beside him and said, "You don't have to carry all of this, you know?" He didn't look at me when he replied, "If I don't say it now, when will I?" And I couldn't argue with that. I placed a hand on his back and whispered, "Then say it. All of it." He nodded. We didn't speak again after that. We didn't need to. He wasn't asking for permission. He was asking for understanding, and I gave it. That moment, the quiet, the stars, the weight of everything unsaid. It felt like the calm before a storm that no one else saw coming. The next morning, Ethan walked out of his room in his cap and gown. He looked sharp, grounded, older somehow. I took a photo. He didn't smile, just straightened his tie and said, "Ready?" "Yes," I whispered, but my hands were trembling. When we arrived at the auditorium, I scanned the crowd and froze. They were there, my father, my siblings, all dressed nicely, seated together in the third row, like they belonged, like they'd earned the right to witness what was coming. I didn't say a word to them, just squeezed Ethan's hand before walking him backstage. "Whatever you say up there," I whispered, "I'm already proud." He nodded. There was no fear in his eyes, just purpose. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the auditorium. The principal took the stage, listing off honors, scholarships, and standout students. Then he introduced the valedictorian of the senior class, Ethan Carter. He spoke of Ethan's GPA, his acceptance to Northwestern, and a few of his awards. I could hear my father behind me making quiet, surprised noises, like he had just realized my son wasn't average. Like this wasn't the same boy he had dismissed with a sentence and a shrug. And then Ethan walked onto the stage. He didn't use the school-approved speech. I noticed it right away. He unfolded his journal instead, the same one he'd carried with him for years, like a lifeline. He stood straight, cleared his throat, and began with the standard pleasantries. Thanks to the teachers, to his peers, to the faculty. His voice was clear, steady, deliberate. Then he paused. A beat of silence, and then everything changed. "There are people in this room," he said, "who didn't expect to see me here today. People who thought I wasn't worth the investment. That being from a broken home made me broken, too." I heard a few gasps. I felt the tension ripple like electricity through the rows of chairs. "But I've learned something," he continued. "You don't have to come from a perfect family to build a powerful future." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush. Each word was planted with precision. "Some of us are born into applause," he said, "and some of us have to earn every single clap." I turned my head to look at my father. He was frozen, stone-faced, not clapping, not blinking. "Good, let him hear it," 'cause Ethan wasn't done. "I was told more than once that my mother failed me." He said that she couldn't give me what I needed. But they were wrong. He looked up and scanned the room. His eyes landed briefly on mine. "She didn't fail me. She fought for me. She taught me to stand tall without applause, to work hard when no one was watching, to believe in myself when the people who were supposed to believe didn't." The room was still. You could hear people breathing. Ethan didn't flinch. He held the microphone like it was an extension of himself, like he had spent a lifetime waiting for this exact moment. "I've seen what silence can do. I've seen what being overlooked teaches you. And I've learned that sometimes being invisible is what gives you the clearest vision. He let that sentence linger. Then softer, he said, to anyone who's ever been told they don't matter, you do. To anyone who's ever felt like a shadow at the dinner table, you shine. And to anyone who is raised to shrink themselves for the comfort of others, stand up. The entire auditorium rose in a wave of applause. Except for my family. Gerald remained seated, arms folded, jaw tight. Caroline shifted uncomfortably. Joel stared at the floor. But none of that mattered. Not anymore. Ethan had taken everything, every slight, every silent insult, every overlooked Christmas, and turned it into something unforgettable. This wasn't a rebellion. This was a reckoning. And when he closed that journal, bowed his head slightly, and walked off stage, I knew in my bones that the room we walked into would never see him the same way again. Ethan hadn't just delivered a speech. He had delivered the truth, okay? And it landed like thunder. The applause was still echoing as Ethan stepped off the stage. He didn't smile. He didn't look for approval. He just returned to his seat with the same quiet dignity he had carried his entire life. I glanced back at my family one last time. Gerald's expression hadn't changed. His arms were still crossed, his lips drawn in a straight, disapproving line. Caroline kept her gaze fixed ahead, pretending nothing had happened. Joel looked like he wished he were anywhere else. But their reactions didn't matter anymore because this day wasn't about them. After the ceremony, families were hugging, taking photos, crying joyful tears. People came up to me, teachers, students, even the school counselor, and said how powerful Ethan's speech had been. A few parents thanked him for saying what their own kids had never had the courage to say. We walked to the car in silence. The summer sun was bright, and the pavement shimmered. When we got in, I finally turned to him. "You did it?" I whispered. Ethan looked out the window. "I just said the truth." Yes. And the truth had been waiting 17 years to be spoken. That evening, we had dinner together at the diner down the street. No big party, no cameras, just pancakes, orange juice, and peace. It was the first time in a long while that I saw him eat without folding his napkin 3 times, without glancing over his shoulder like he was waiting to be overlooked again. When the check came, he paid with his own money from his job. And as he slid the receipt across the table, he said almost to himself, "I think I'm done shrinking." That night back home, I opened my laptop and saw the unanswered email invitations I had sent. Still no replies, still no congratulations. But I didn't feel bitter. Not anymore. Because they had been there and they had heard it. Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand revenge. He just stood tall and told the truth. And in doing so, he claimed something no fund or family toast could ever give him: his place, his worth, his voice. He didn't need them to clap. He had earned every single step on his own. I once thought the only way to get love from my family was to stay quiet, to stay small. But my son taught me that the real power is in being heard, even if your voice shakes, especially then. So to anyone listening, if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been told you're not enough, remember this. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is not loud. It's the silence you break with your truth.